Hey guys, Deathletter Magic here, and Mark Rosewater's back at it again with another article in which he's probably going to claim he had a word limit, but looking at it, I'm starting to wonder. So it's titled 27 Things You Might Not Have Known About the Time Spiral Block, and I'm going to breeze through them and give my opinions on them. By the way, if I wrote this, it would just be one thing that I might not have known about the Time Spiral Block. Anything, because I didn't play back then. So the way he frames it is, as we're revisiting the Time Spiral block with Time Spiral Remastered, I thought it might be fun to revisit the block's design, so the original block's design, in my column. So apparently he had something to do with that. Which, I mean, yeah, it wasn't that well received. So I would have guessed he had something to do with it, and those god-awful new frames, and if it's bad, he probably had something to do with it. And I'm not just saying that because, ooh, me no like Mark. Ooh, Mark do things, so me say bad. No, look at the storm scale. Basically everything 7 and up was his design. Yes, I'm citing like 20 years of his work as my proof to support my claim that almost everything bad in the game was done by him and him alone. Anyway, number 1, he says Time Spiral block brings back a lot of mechanics from the past. I did know that, actually. Anyway, he says, but to play into the past, present, and future time motif of the block, which, by the way, I played along to and screwed with my backgrounds and the spoilers in case you missed it. He says, I chose a mechanic representing the past, another representing the present, and a third representing the future to premiere in each set. I bet a lot of people didn't notice that because, honestly, I didn't notice that. So I guess, like, the 3 sets were also, like, past, present, and future. So Time Spiral got the mechanic Flashback, which is, of course, digging up a spell from the past. Planar Chaos got Vanishing, which is really just fading. And then Future Sight got Scry, which, honestly, that's a bit of a stretch. Unless that was the set that invented the keyword Scry. I mean, it's evergreen now, so I have no way of knowing, but it seems like he kind of accidentally did this and then he's taking credit for it. That's my take on it, because he does stuff like that all the time. Next up, number 2, he says original Ravnica block, the block right before Time Spiral, was the first full block that I ran as head designer. And he said at the time one of his top goals was to take abilities that they kept reprinting and just give them a keyword. So when Time Spiral came out, they finally named Flash. And then get this, now even I didn't know this. I mean, if you're not getting the theme, I didn't know most of the stuff in this article, which I actually haven't read yet. I'm just making an assumption. Death Touch, Lifelink, Reach, and Shroud all got introduced in Future Sight. And then because of the whole, alternate reality timeline, whatever the heck, multiverse theme, some of them were only named on like the future shifted cards. So it's like, oh, in the future, we might give this a keyword, and then they did, but then because they did, then they kept using it later. I can't believe that even in an original Ravnica, they had to spell out, here's what Death Touch does, here's what Lifelink does. God, that must have been annoying. Can you even imagine that? I mean, if you played back then, you don't have to imagine it. You lived it. Oh, he says that he also wanted to put in the keyword unblockable, but then he says, we're not consistent enough in how we template it to keyword it. That's a nice way of saying unblockable is unbelievably OP as balls, so usually when we do put it on a card, at least lately, we restrict it, like cannot be blocked by walls or cannot be blocked as an activated ability. Yeah, I'm glad that didn't take off. 1 aura equipment and then some hexproof, some counterspells, and you've got an unstoppable creature. You just swing away every turn and win the game. So, not a fan of unblockable myself. I was, in the first year I played the game, I thought it was the best thing ever and put it in every one of my decks. But as a more mature, experienced player who has a better, higher view of all the cards and how they work, I recognize it as unfair and a bad thing for the game. You want unblockable? Roll the dice on flying. See if they can block it. So number 3 gets even crazier. He said that Flash didn't originally get proposed as a keyword. Instead, he wanted to make it a card super type. So it would just be like an instant creature. So he said that it would be instant sorcery for instants as we think of them now, and then instant creature for creature with Flash. And I assume instant enchantment, instant artifact. I don't know. Is there any artifact with Flash in the game? There's probably a couple. So then he says the current rules manager at the time, Mark Gottlieb, says he came up with a great system if we would have started it from Magic's very beginning, but we're too far into the current system to change it, which, I mean, then fast forward to like Companion. There is no limit to these people. Ooh, that'll screw with the rules too much. Fast forward to BFZ colorless mana generation. Here's another fun one. He says, I originally created hybrid mana for the original Ravnica block, but the development team removed it from the set early in development. That describes Mark's entire career. He comes up with some absolutely crazy, wacky, like so far outside the box, really pushing the limit idea. And then the people who actually know what they're doing, who like understand the rules and write the rules and play test the cards, they try to kind of rein him in and water it down or just completely veto it. That's been his entire career by his own admission and other staff members' first-party accounts. Now, that said, I mean, there's nothing really wrong with hybrid mana. It's just, that's a pretty drastic thing. Now, it turned out it worked. I mean, some of Mark's ideas are good, just not many of them. Remember, he tried to implement Companion once before, and it didn't work. Same with Lotus Cobra. They tried to put the card in BFZ, he said, and it was too OP. And then he didn't learn his lesson about either of them. So number 5, this is wild. Suspend, called Delay at the time, was originally designed for Saviors of Kamigawa. Why? Well, remember, the whole Champions of Kamigawa block, the whole thing was like legendary, legendary, legendary. So early on in the design of that, they thought, what would be cool? What would go with this? Well, really big splashy spells, but they took a while to resolve. I'll just say it right now, Sagas did it better. So I guess they wanted to do it with like one cycle of legendary cards and that's it. It was going to be in the rare slot and it was going to be, well, he says spells. So, creatures or more traditionally what people consider to be spells, let's be honest. Not sure which, but I could see it being either. So Mark said, no. This is like such a thing that we need to build it into an entire block, not just one cycle in one set inside one block. And now all these 0 CMC spells are broken as hell and everybody hates them in Modern. So there you go. Oh, and if you're wondering what they ended up doing, it was the epic mechanic. If you haven't seen epic spells, it's pretty wild. I'll just give you a little hint. You should look it up and look up what they all do. But it starts with, you can't cast any more spells for the rest of the game. So number 6, everybody knows this. I don't know why I even made this a point. The creative team, aka the story team, came to him and said, it's too hard to write, stories and lore and stuff for the sets when the Planeswalkers are basically gods. They have godlike powers. We got to water it down, and that's where they did the mending, because they said now they're more relatable as characters, and I guess there's like stakes now, and really godlike powers that live forever, because I'm pretty sure they were eternal or close to it pre-mending. You're finding it too hard to write for that. And then let's just compare that to all of Greek mythology. They're finding it hard to write compelling stories about characters that interesting with such a unique, different means of existing, and then there's Greek mythology. Really? You couldn't come up with more stories? Compelling stories, interesting stories that people would find interesting 2,000 years later, really? Maybe you're just bad at your jobs. My beef with it would have been, okay, this person's been around for 100,000 years. Why haven't we heard about them yet? Like every time you create a new Planeswalker, like why weren't they in every story? Number 7, I'm starting to think that Mark ran out of good ideas at 5 and then just made it 27 because he had to fill the word count. He said, once again, I had hybrid mana and suspend in mind, and it's like, oh, so I went to the creative department and said, make a story where something is messing with like time, and then the fundamental way that mana works. And so they did. That's all of number 7. So number 8's kind of interesting. It's really just an elaboration on what he already said, but in the early design, they wanted hybrid mana and suspend, and then he realized that those two mechanics have absolutely no interaction with each other whatsoever. They don't build on each other, they don't associate with each other. And so then they tried lowering the number of cards with hybrid mana. Oh, that was after they designed it without hybrid mana and realized that the set was kind of dull. So they added it back in a small amount, then they took it back out again. If you're wondering how sets get so screwed up, it's because top-level decisions like that keep happening. I mean, I get it, you want to throw things around, and I don't know how early this was, but when you waffle that much, it's like, I don't know. Number 9 is that suspend originally wasn't optional. They were going to just have cards with suspend. Then the dev team thought, nah, you want to pay more mana, just get the spell. You want to pay less mana, then you gotta wait. Which, by the way, does not describe all of the suspend cards. I mean, basically, it says they realized that the suspend mandatory cards were just terrible late game because you need them now. But then to go even further with it, they made a couple cards that manipulated the count of like time counters on cards that were in suspend so you could get them out earlier. Number 10, this was short but interesting. They had manually given every single creature with suspend haste instead of just saying suspend includes haste. Later, they changed it to just suspend granting haste. In fact, the very last 3 words of the reminder text for suspend, which is a small novel, by the way, if you haven't read it, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of text. The last 3 words are, it has haste. And that is part of the official rules for suspend. Number 11 is a hilarious mistake that they made, but I guess he's saying that they pulled it off. He doesn't really say that, but he doesn't say they didn't. He says the suspend mechanic had a visual cue in the artwork. You would see a light blue time wave, and that would be covering part of the illustration. And then through that wave, you would see the exact same scene that's going on in the foreground, but like at a different point in time. However, once the art was drawn for a card, and it had the blue time wave in the very distinct background, you had to put suspend on it. You couldn't not put suspend, and then you couldn't add suspend to a card whose art didn't have it, which was a massive headache for development, playtesting, and everything. So this was where they decided to never, ever, ever again try to, on a large scale, tie the artwork to a mechanic. Now, number 12 is just confusing, so I'm just going to read it. I'm not sure what point he's getting at here. In the Time Spiral design handoff, we gave each color its own mechanic from the past. White got Kicker, blue got Buyback, black got Shadow, red got Storm, and green got Echo. All 5 colors got a flashback at common and uncommon, and that was the past mechanic. We also had a common cycle of Spell Shapers, other mechanics that showed up in Cameo. On 1 to 3 cards was Flanking, Madness, Amplify, Incarnation, Land Cycling, and Cumulative Upkeep. Development ended up adding in a lot more repeating mechanics. So when they handed the high-level ideas off to the design team to design the specific cards, which he still claims to this day he doesn't have a hand in, but he clearly does, they did all of this and then added even more repeating mechanics from the past just because time travel, and they didn't think that would be confusing as crap to people. That's not even a good idea. And then at the end, he doesn't say, and all of them made it into the final product. Now, if I knew more about the set, I could tell you if those were all included, but I don't, and I don't care. Number 13, here's an interesting one. Not every mechanic designed by the Time Spiral design team made it to print. One mechanic was called Relentless, and it allowed creatures to attack twice each turn. Imagine Relentless attack, but stapled to creatures. Well, I would if the card wasn't actually called Relentless Assault, Mark. That's a plane chase card that says untap all creatures, add another combat phase after the next main phase, and, just confusing, stupid, game-breaking, and OP and annoying. So he's like, oh, this matched the lore and the flavor perfectly because creatures are moving faster in time. And then he just stops there and never gives a reason for why it didn't make it. Number 14, we also used a mechanic called Anchor. These are big creatures for cheap that required a mana payment for upkeep. They should have called it Mercenary then, not Anchor. What the hell does Anchor have to do with anything? So he's like, oh, it was a callback to the upkeep costs. Yeah, everybody hated that. Cumulative upkeep was so annoying. So he said that was supposed to make up for, it would get in some early hits and have some early board presence while you're waiting for your suspend spells to go off. Sounds just like an OP blitzy crap that nobody would have bothered with suspend, and they would have used it in a different way than they designed it. And once again, he doesn't say why it didn't make it, but I bet that's why. I've noticed that they get really, really narrow-minded. They're like, we designed, this cycle, this mechanic, this card, these sequence of cards to do exactly this. And then the users, us and customers, we go, well, I'm going to use it this way because math and because strategy and because this is an optimized thing. I'm not going to use it the way that you thought we would use it. And the classic example is really Collected Company and Oko. Those are the big 2 that people always point to. In both cases, the designers of the cards said, I thought it would be used for this, but then people went and used it for this instead, and we didn't think of that because we designed it for the use as this. Okay, every time you start playtesting a set, early on, think, what is the most toxic, overpowered, abusive way to play this card? And then go through every card and think that. And then try to make the most unbelievably unfair, horrible, oppressive, garbage, toxic deck from hell, or even just card combination from hell, and then get rid of one of the cards or water it down so that people can't do that if it's an unacceptable combination. That's how you play test this, because just assume the worst out of all your players, because 1% of them are going to put together a deck like that, post it on the internet, and then certainly 20% of people are going to be playing it. I don't know what they intended for Approach of the Second Sun, which is cast it once, gain a bunch of life, put it back in your library, cast it twice, win the game. But then people were like, okay, I'll just run a bunch of draw and board wipes and control. I'll run 3-color control, and on turn 40, I'll win the game. And that's what everybody did. It would appear that they did not think people would do that. Well, people did that. People will do anything to get a cheap, easy, guaranteed win. Expect the worst from your players when you are playtesting. That should be on a poster in their R&D department. Yeah, so what I'm saying is people would have ran all anchor. It would have just been early blitz, and then once they get the board presence on turn 3 or 4, they would just spend all their mana paying for it and just attack. If they all died, they would just forfeit the game because it's an all-in, turn 5-6 win rush. So number 15, he explains that he wanted a splashy mechanic. Oh boy, and a cycle. So not really mechanic, just a cycle. And it was going to be called Nostalgic. So it was going to be Nostalgic Veteran, Nostalgic Wizard, Zombie, Bolt, Beast, and Artifact, which, yeah, a lot of cycles are 6 cards. That makes sense, Mark. So he explains it as, if this card was in your deck, it allowed you to have 4 copies of any card from a certain subset in your deck, regardless of format restrictions. I was excited by it. Why am I not surprised? But it was a little too, quote, out there for R&D. So he wrote out some examples. No joke, this is what it would be. Nostalgic Veteran, 3-cost Creature Soldier, 2-3 Vigilant Great. Nostalgic, 2-3. As long as this card is in your deck, you may have up to 4 copies of any 2-3 creature legal in Vintage. So breaking the standard restriction, having a pseudo, like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but highly restricted expansion of standard, but it's like based on what's in your deck, and gee, I wonder why they shot that down. Never change the basic way a format works with writing on one individual card. That is just asking for trouble. Like all rats in Singleton. Like happened on MTG Arena. I'm literally citing an example. He even goes on, one of the big pieces of feedback I got was how hard it would be for deck checking at tournaments. Yes, you'd need a frickin' computer to do it. Did he give up? Did he admit it was a terrible idea? Did he apologize for wasting the time of anybody whose, time was wasted by him showing them this? No, he says, I tried a slightly different approach of the mechanic called gatekeeping. Gatekeeping was where you can let it produce a copy of any card from that subset rather than let you have them in your deck. Here, this took me literally 3 seconds. I came up with this as I was reading that sentence. So you're just shifting it from initial deck checking to now they're calling over the judge so the judge can go look up if that card existed somewhere in Vintage. Are you that stupid, Mark? Seriously? You can't see me, but I'm actually trying to strangle my pop filter in front of my mic right now. Like I've got both hands on it. So the way he actually phrased it on the card was Time Recruit, instant, put a token into play as a copy of any 2-3 creature, period. So as long as you have Time Recruit as an instant in your deck, whatever format you're in, Commander, all the stuff that wasn't invented yet, I assume, but a draft, can you imagine what fresh hell that would be? Just anything, now all of a sudden, instead of whatever you were playing, standard, extended, Commander, modern, now you're basically playing Vintage because this card is in your deck. And then imagine like drafting this or getting it in a sealed pool. And then you have to real quick, just look up every 2-3 creature that has ever existed in the history of the game to figure out what you want to drop in. Hold on. Let me just get out my smartphone, which I don't remember when Time Spiral came out, but I'll just say probably didn't even exist as an invention yet. At least not widespread adoption. And let me just run a quick search on a website that probably didn't exist at the time, The Gatherer. And let me just really quick read the, 50 creatures that are 2-3s. Oh, this one. I'll pick this one. And by that time, the round is over. What kind of drugs was Mark on? Nobody who considers themselves a professional gets paid to do work like this should come up with something that stupid for even 2 seconds without dismissing it as, well, that would be functionally impossible. It gets worse. There's one called Time Zombie. It costs 1, and then when it dies, basically, you may pay X. If you do, put a creature token into play that is a copy of any zombie. And then it never references X. Well, if you set a variable and never use it, it probably was supposed to say zombie with CMC. So any zombie ever printed in the history of the game could be summoned with this 1/1 black zombie. This right here should be evidence that he should be fired because he's this stupid or worse these days. Like, what about starting with 8 cards, aka companion, and then always knowing what one of the cards is and having half the pieces of a combination, big splashy combo spell that's game ending, What about that seemed okay or fair and balanced? Like, what in his head was like, yes, that's a good idea? You'd have to be like new to Magic, let alone 20 plus years experience with the game. Also, let alone it's his job. He gets paid to do this. This is not some person speculating on the internet. It's his job to be good at this. And then to turn that around and after this amount of time and that amount of mistakes to still be this stupid about the game and say, no, somebody starting with 8 cards in hand is just fine. What's wrong with that? And then the entire community just attacking him and them having to change the fundamental rules of the game to undo a mistake that was entirely his fault for something that he designed by himself. And he still has a job at Wizards of the Coast. Companion should have been the single biggest reason he gets fired, and he still works there. I cannot believe this. So next up, we got number 16. When I first pitched the concept of a bonus sheet, which is the purple rarity, in Time Spiral design, I was worried that people would be resistant to the idea. Everything you come up with, people are resistant to. You should be, quote, worried that people would be resistant to all of your dumb ideas. You should be used to it at this point. You actually joke about it to this day. So he said, okay, let's kind of ease into it gently. What if, whenever you got a foil card, half of the time it was a cool old reprint instead? Which actually that would have been kind of cool. Remember the cards from The List? You know, that's rotating and it's in the I just call them the art boosters. What are they called? The set boosters. And by the way, before they even invented that, like years before, I said, why don't they just stop printing Masters and just put a Masters slot in every standard pack and up the value and then help drive down the cost of the standard staples? Because, 25% of the value in a given pack or box or set or however you want to measure it would be the reprints, the Masters cards. So why don't they just do that? It would make standard cheaper, but it would also up sales. And it would make people who don't play standard buy standard boosters to see what's in that one slot. Because honestly, in a modern Masters booster or any Masters set, you really only care about the rare and the foil anyway. So they copied my idea, made it a set booster, and also I guess it was an idea in the original Time Spiral. But it was going to be really rare. Like you said, it was going to be basically 1 in 8 packs effectively would have a cool old reprint. So he says upper management was willing to go along with the idea. Yeah, not surprising. It adds value to a pack. I mean, even I'm behind that idea. But they kept asking us to make it more frequent. I don't know. Would you consider 1 in 8 to be a complete write-off? Because, 1 in 60-ish or whatever it was for Masterpiece cards was enough for people to buy more than they should. First time around, the value was, I think it was about 21% of the set was just those couple Masterpiece cards. And they appeared like every other booster box. And that's still, they were like, $100 to $200 cards. So they propped up the value by, they represented the value of the set at 21% approximately. At the time of release, I should say. That is not true now. So 1 in 8, they thought that would be problematic. They're not exactly doing expeditions. It might be like, a $10 reprint or something, but I don't know. I would think that everybody would be on the same page saying, no, this will get people to buy them without flooding the market and devaluing everything. I would have been behind it, so I'm surprised that they said that. So he says the result was, well, now it's a full bonus sheet and it was 1 per pack. So they made it 8 times more prevalent, but then as we all know, they included a bunch of garbage filler cards. So at the end of the day, they really just did the same thing. They made 1/8 of the cards really good and valuable, and then the rest were crap. And then you got 1 per pack, and really you just got an actually good card in 1 in 8 packs, approximately, I assume. So it's the exact same end result. It's just, I don't know, maybe there's a mental component where people would be like, oh, the next one will have it. Oh, the next one will have it, instead of just, oh, I got nothing. Spoiler alert, if you opened up a purple rarity card that's worth 25 cents, you have effectively got nothing. Next up, number 17. Oh, we're getting wild at the end here. Aaron Forsyth, who should have less of a job than Mark Rosewater there. That guy, I don't even start. He was the one who didn't know how Coco would work. He was shocked at the fact that people played it. And that it's like now a $20 card. That was a surprise to him. He didn't think that free casting 2 tribals directly out of your deck was problematic. He thought the card would be a draft gimmick. Like, oh, I might hit something with that, and then it would have no room in constructed whatsoever in any format. That is what he said. So yeah, Aaron, that genius, Forsyth, was put in charge of the time-shifted cheat. And it went through many iterations. About once a week, we'd ask for an update. My God, it shouldn't have taken more than a week. And Aaron would show us where the time-shifted cheat was currently at. I'm not exaggerating when I say there were probably hundreds of different combinations that Aaron tried. Well, I think at the time they were legal, so it's like, yeah, you'd want to be very careful about what you include effectively in the like deck building competitive meta and all that stuff. And I remember Mark even saying that there was like one red card that got through that just wrecked everything. So end of the story is Aaron underestimated a card. I know, I'm shocked, let it go through and destroyed the standard meta. Oopsies, no accountability, none whatsoever. He still has a job, he still got paid the same, I assume. Now, number 18, this one doesn't surprise me at all. It's kind of like an extension of the last one. For a while, all the cards on the time-shifted sheet weren't going to be standard legal. So we had a lot of crazy cards on it. We realized, though, that we had a bit of a communication problem. At the time, we referred to the sets as standard legal, as in you're buying a standard legal product, period. I added that because he wasn't clear on that. Why could I pull a card out of a standard legal set and not have it be standard legal? We brainstormed answers, but realized in the end it was just easier to make the cards legal. And then he ends that section with more work for Aaron. I can't believe he didn't end it with LOL. So number 19, in a similar respect, they initially were going to give the time-shifted cards a different expansion symbol, but he thought that would confuse people. But also, they had to know that it was a time-shifted card. So if you just threw a, gold rarity symbol on it, how does anybody know that it's, a special thing from the past? They'd either have to just know, or they'd have to remember where it was in the booster. Eventually they settled on, let's just make it the same expansion symbol, but give it a different color. So they decided against white, blue, red, and green, and then black, silver, and gold were already taken at that time. So that left the options of yellow, orange, purple, and brown. So his account was that yellow looked too much like gold, brown looked ugly, obviously. And so it was down to orange and purple. We chose purple. Years later, we had to pick a color for the new mythic rarity, and we ended up using orange because that was, left over. It was the semi-finalist, as it were. I'm kind of embellishing these because his writing's really boring. So number 20, this is mind-blowing. I actually kind of knew this one. So he says, originally the time shifted to the purple rarity bonus sheet was only going to appear in Time Spiral, the one set out of 3. Then he came up with an idea for Future Sight that was a fantastic idea. Preprints. It was a reprint of a card that might show up in the game in the future. And then he thought, well, if we're going to do it for 2 sets, we should probably do something for the past one, which is Planar Chaos. So then he thought, let's do an alternate timeline past, which is the color-shifted cards. If you're not familiar with the color-shifted cards, if my memory serves, it's like Mana Tithe, where it's like, what if in an alternate timeline, alternate past, white was the mana color that was in charge of counterspells? And so they made a white counterspell called Mana Tithe. It's not like it was the only time it was ever printed, but it was supposed to be like a wacky, whoa, look at this. But it was really just a bunch of color pie breaks that haunt the game up until today. It was honestly one of the worst conceived ideas in the entire history of the game was, let's just break the color pie and then insert all these cards into Eternal formats. What could go wrong? Luckily, the cards weren't honestly very good. Like Mana Tithe is garbage. So for number 21, he decided to throw in a trivia question out of nowhere. All right, it's on. Game show time. He says, I'll start this off with a trivia question. I'll answer at the end of the section. From which booster pack in Time Spiral block can you pull 2 rares, not counting foils? Don't know, don't care, didn't play back then. I would literally just be guessing. So he says, while all 3 sets in the Time Spiral block had a time-shifted sheet, how we put them into each booster pack changed significantly between the sets. Now, I did not know this because I've never opened any boosters of Time Spiral or anything from the block. So the Time Spiral block had 1 time-shifted purple rarity bonus sheet, whatever, he keeps using them interchangeably. It had 1 of those cards. 1 per booster, period, the end, no more, no less. Planar Chaos had 3 common time-shifted cards and 1 uncommon or rare time-shifted card in each booster. And then Future Sight, the third one, had anywhere from 5 to 10 time-shifted cards in each booster with no guarantee of any rarity. How many time-shifted cards a set's booster included had a lot to do with what role they played in the set. Oh, so they also printed them unevenly? How'd they even pull that off? Time Spiral's time-shifted sheet included all reprints, so it was more of flavoring. Planar Chaos and Future Sight had all new cards. I thought they all had the same sheet. All 3 of them worked off of the same pool of 121 cards. I guess not. Well, I guess he contradicted that idea earlier anyway. I just didn't catch on, but okay. So he just said, yeah, I mean, we wanted to, with Future Sight, we wanted to get more of them into players' hands because they're reprints and whatever. So the answer to the trivia question is Time Spiral and Planar Chaos. So the answer to which booster pack, singular, in the Time Spiral block can you pull 2 rares from? And the answer is Time Spiral and Planar Chaos. And the sub-answer is, clearly Mark did not proofread this. So number 22, he says that Split Second, the mechanic, was originally called Super Fast. Why couldn't it have been Mega Instant? Now that mechanic was originally going to be to keep the other guilds from messing with Izzet's spells in Guild Pact. Oh no, it'd be so bad if we disrupted Storm. Wouldn't that be terrible? In the end, they decided Replicate worked better, so okay. So they shelved the idea of Split Second, and then they added it to Cold Snap in the initial design. And then because Time Spiral was already in development, not design, that team, quote, asked if they could take the Split Second mechanic, and the Cold Snap design team said it was okay. I'm so sure that's how peacefully that went down. Number 23 starts with, I had a big argument with... Really? People disagreed with you on something, Mark. I'm shocked. So he says, I had a big argument, with the marketing department over the advertising plans for Cold Snap. The initial campaign had a tagline like Rediscover the Past. And I was like, that's exactly the theme of Time Spiral. It took some arguing, but I finally got them to change it. Rediscover the Past. That literally, like, the first thing I think of is archaeology. Or like stuff frozen in a glacier somewhere. I mean, I would have done, climate change is a bitch, or like, something like that. War never changes, just like ice. Or just, oh crap, everything's frozen now. I mean, that tagline, that's an attention grabber. I mean, come on. And then I would have done like, the timeline is in trouble, or the fabric of whatever is falling apart for Time Spiral. Because like, rediscover the past, well... Now there's like multiple pasts and the timeline in reality is being corrupted. So what do you mean the past? If anything, it should be the pasts with an S at the end. So I think they're both wrong on both accounts. Number 24, I kid you not, I'm not making this up. Let me just read it verbatim. Mark says, I had to talk Bill Rose into leading the design for Planar Chaos. Bill originally turned me down. You mean he didn't want to work with you? That's so weird. I wonder why that would be. From Mark's perspective, his opinion on what down... and let me just preface it with that, was he just didn't get my vision for an alternative present. I don't even understand what that means. I ended up designing some cards, including Damnation, as a proof of concept of what I envisioned. What the hell kind of alternate timeline is Damnation for? It's just a board wipe. Ooh, big explosion. What, did a big explosion happen in a different timeline? I'm sure if I knew the lore, it would make perfect sense to me, but on the surface, it doesn't. Well, I guess he's saying once he saw my take on the alternate color pie, so yeah, I guess a black board wipe wasn't a thing back then. So he's like, oh, this will be the alternative present. Isn't it alternative past or alternative future? Well, he said Planar Chaos. No, so it would be alternative past. Maybe that's where you lost him. So he said, yeah, single-handedly the card Damnation got him on board. Well, I'm going to take the whole color pie, flush it down the toilet, and hope that there's not repercussions for this over the next 20 years. And he's like, I'm on board with that. Let's screw up a basic tenet of the game that's been there since its inception in 1993. I'm 100% on board with that. Now that you showed me an example of something that the color black should never do. Thanks. I'm 100% behind you. Yeah, add that to the list of things that never, ever, ever happened in reality ever and that Mark is completely lying about, in my opinion. Number 25. If you didn't think that Mark was absolutely insane and has absolutely no concept of proper gameplay or boundaries, it starts with, Planar Chaos was the closest we've ever come to printing a 6th color. And then the very next sentence is, we joked about a 6th color for years. Yes, it's a joke. People aren't serious about it. When people constantly meme on a certain theme, like, haha, they should do this, nobody is serious. Why do you take it seriously and think, ha 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 ha, write that down? We should do that. That'll be so wacky. Nobody will expect it. It's like he tries to come up with the most batshit crazy thing he possibly can, and then tries to convince all the other staff to go along with it. And then when it turns out to be a terrible idea, he puts it at 9 on the storm scale and then doesn't apologize for it, and then proceeds to make the same mistake a year later. That's Mark Rosewater's entire career summed up. That idiot, that incompetent, terrible at his job employee should not have a job at Wizards of the Coast anymore. We all know it. It's not a meme or a joke when people say fire Mark Rosewater. It's because they actually want him gone because of actual reasons and actual evidence. Okay, he needs to go. So anyway, yeah, they're going to introduce it for just one set as like an alternate reality. It was going to be in Planar Chaos, and the color was going to be obviously purple, as everybody knows. And the basic land behind it, because, you know, we have forest, mountain, plains, it was going to be cave, and then it was going to be city. Oh, gee, little Jimmy, what type of deck are you playing? Oh, thanks for asking, Des. I'm running Urban Purple. I play Legendary Starbucks Land. Pass turn. So it was going to be between blue and black on the color wheel, he calls it now. So we thought, well, if we're only going to do it once, we want people to actually play it, we better make it absolutely overpowered and broken. So they initially had the card Mana Drain designed for it, which is Counterspell on steroids, which is already cancel on steroids. But yeah, it was going to be a double purple mana instead of blue. It turned out to be harder to balance than we thought. Really? It's almost like the math wouldn't add up when the like literally the shape of the sheet coming out of the printer is based on 5 colors-ish. Gee, how did that not come together and work perfectly, I wonder? So there actually is an entire article written about the purple experiment and some of the purple cards they came up with and the problems and all that. I might actually go read that just to see it. I might even make a video on that. It was actually written in 2007, believe it or not. So number 26, when Planar Chaos came out, I answered a bunch of questions about on a popular Magic site at the time called MTG Salvation. Yeah, now look at it. They almost went bankrupt once, I heard, and now it's just Troll Central. It makes Reddit look polite. That garbage pile of a website is now like officially 90% dick measuring, arguing about what's tier 1 and what's not. That just comes down to I'm better than you and I'm playing tier 1 and I say it's a tier 1 because I say it's a tier 1. And there's just 10% shit posting and witch hunts. It's kind of the same thing. You know what? I suggest everybody go to MTG Salvation right now. Go to the decks section or whatever. I don't know. I literally haven't been to the website in like 5 years. And just start arguing about what's tier 1. Just no matter what somebody says, they are wrong. And let them know that they're wrong. And you'll see just how psychotic some members of the community can get. Although I could show you some comments from my comment section that would prove it too. There are over 3,000 people banned from my channel, out of about 150,000 unique viewers per month. Oh, Des, 3,000 sounds like a lot of people. That's 2%. Do the math. 2%. If you work customer service, you'd be shocked that only 2% of any given community of human beings is batshit crazy. So he posted a Q&A and something about a running gag about colors. I don't honestly give a crap. So I'm switching to number 27, the final one. And he saved the biggest, baddest one for last. I don't know about you personally, but like me, I'm just having a blast reading this. This is some crazy what-if kind of stuff and another just peek behind the curtain that is absolutely fascinating. But number 27, Planeswalkers were originally going to be part of Future Sight on the Future Shifted cards. How cool would that have been? I mean, it was like arguably the worst thing to ever happen to the game ever was the addition of Planeswalkers. Some people say Mythic Rarity, but that's kind of like a meta thing. That's more of like a financial thing than a card design thing. But as far as functionality in the game, yeah, Planeswalkers never should have been on cards. Just period. But still, I mean, if they did it, like how crazy would that have been? It's like this weird thing and then it comes true and still would have been terrible, but it would have been neat. So anyway, they decided against it and they replaced the Planeswalker cards with other cards. So we've got, 4 draft ideas for Venser, and he spells them all out, but I'm not going to bother to read them. Go look at the article if you want to, but basically Venser was going to be a Planeswalker with, loyalty and abilities. By the way, the first 2 say loyalty 18 and loyalty 20. So they weren't kidding when they're like, the Planeswalker is another player in the game, kind of. It's more actually backwards. It's Planeswalkers are Planeswalkers, but you as the player with your life total are a Planeswalker playing the game. Well, then the third draft had loyalty 1, and then with the 4th one, they went back up to 10. So they were all over the place here. Yeah, you guys should go look at some of these templates for them. They get just nuts. So hey, these were the 27 interesting things that you probably didn't know about the Time Spiral block, a lot of which in the middle were just filler that clearly I did know, and I've only been playing since 2013. But you guys probably found something interesting in this article, so Leave a like on the video if you did. Don't forget to subscribe because I've just now dropped below 50k because nobody gives a crap about Magic the Gathering anymore. So if you want to help offset it, subscribe and oh boy, maybe someday I'll get to 50k. I was at like 51.4 before the problems with my channel where the monetization just broke. And then a bunch of you were just like, all right, time to head out. Like, why? I fixed it 6 weeks later. I should say YouTube fixed it. Anyway, whatever. Sub if you want. Don't if you don't. I don't give a crap. I really only care about my other 2 channels at this point. So thanks for watching, everyone. And I'll see you guys next video.